Colorado Territory, 1876. The wind howled through the valley, carrying the bite of winter across the rugged landscape of the Colorado Territory. April Miller stared out the frosted window of her father's trading post, her dark eyes fixed on the swirling snow that had begun to blanket the world outside. Her slender fingers traced patterns on the glass, much like the memories that traced patterns across her heart. A year. It had been a full year since she'd watched him disappear into those snow-covered mountains. A year since Uncas had pressed his forehead against hers and whispered promises in a mixture of English and Apache that only they understood. A year since her tears had frozen on her cheeks as he walked away, taking pieces of her heart with him. April tucked a strand of her raven-black hair behind her ear and sighed. The trading post was quiet today, the blizzard keeping most folks at home. Her father had gone to Denver 2 days prior, leaving her to manage the store with only the company of Mrs. Simmons, their housekeeper, who was currently in the kitchen preparing supper. "You keep staring at that window like you expect it to talk back," Mrs. Simmons said, shuffling into the store portion of their home, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your pa would be right upset if he knew you were still mooning over that Indian." April's spine stiffened. "His name is Uncas, Mrs. Simmons, and I'm not mooning over anyone. I'm simply watching the snow." The older woman's eyes softened. "Child, I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. You can't fool old Mrs. Simmons. That Apache fella broke your heart when he left, and you ain't been the same since." April turned away from the window, her dark eyes flashing with a mixture of pain and defiance. "He didn't break my heart. He did what he had to do. His people needed him. And what about what you needed?" Mrs. Simmons asked, her voice gentle now. "What about your father who worked so hard to give you a proper upbringing? What would the townsfolk say if they knew how you felt about him?" "I don't care what they would say," April whispered, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. In this territory, in this time, there were rules, unspoken but ironclad, about who could love whom. And April Miller, daughter of respected merchant William Miller, was not supposed to lose her heart to an Apache warrior. "Well, you should care," Mrs. Simmons replied, though without malice. "Now come help me set the table. No use dwelling on what can't be changed." April nodded, following the older woman into the kitchen, though her thoughts remained with Uncas. The way his dark eyes had looked at her that last day, filled with such conflict and pain. The way his strong hands had cupped her face, as if she were made of the finest porcelain. The way his voice had broken when he'd said, "I will come back for you, April Miller. This I promise." A promise made in the snow. A promise she had clung to through the changing seasons. Through spring, when the wildflowers bloomed along the riverbank where they had first met. Through summer, when the heat reminded her of the fire in his touch. Through autumn, when the falling leaves mirrored her falling hopes. Now winter had returned, harsh and unforgiving, just like the world that had torn them apart. The sound of the front door's bell jerked April from her thoughts. She frowned, placing down the plate she had been holding. "Who in their right mind would be out in this weather?" Mrs. Simmons muttered, dusting flour from her hands. April moved toward the store portion of their home, her heartbeat quickening without reason. "I'll see who it is." The wind had blown snow through the briefly opened door, leaving a dusting of white on the wooden floorboards. A tall figure stood just inside, wrapped in a heavy coat crusted with ice and snow, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. "We're just about to close," April said, her voice steady despite the sudden flutter in her chest. "But if you need supplies to wait out the storm—" The figure raised a gloved hand and slowly removed his hat, and April's world stopped spinning. Dark, intense eyes that she had seen every night in her dreams, strong features that had haunted her memories, a face that belonged to a man who, by all the rules of society, she was forbidden to love. "Uncas," she breathed, her voice barely audible above the howling wind outside. He stood before her, changed and yet achingly familiar. New scars marked his handsome face, one along his jawline, another above his left eyebrow. His hair was longer now, tied back with a leather cord. But his eyes were the same, deep and soulful, looking at her as if she were the only star in his night sky. "April Miller," he said, his deep voice washing over her like a physical caress. For a moment, neither moved. The space between them seemed both vast as the mountains and narrow as a whisper. Then rage, hot and unexpected, surged through April's veins. 1 year. 1 year of waiting, wondering, hoping. 1 year of defending him to her father, to Mrs. Simmons, to herself. 1 year of empty promises and cold nights. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How dare you walk in here after a year of silence? Not a word, Uncas, not a single word to let me know you were alive." Pain flickered across his face. "I could not send word. It would have put you in danger." "In danger?" April echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "What about the danger to my heart, to my soul? Do you know what it's like to wake every morning wondering if the person you love is dead or alive?" Mrs. Simmons appeared in the doorway behind April, her eyes widening at the sight of Uncas. "Heaven help us," she muttered, crossing herself. Uncas's gaze never left April's face. "I made a promise," he said simply, as if those 4 words explained everything, as if they could bridge the chasm of a year's absence. "A promise," April repeated, her voice hollow. "And you think that's enough? You think you can just—" The sound of horses approaching outside cut through her words. Uncas turned sharply toward the door, his body tensing like a predator sensing danger. "Army patrol," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I was followed." April's anger gave way to fear. Uncas was Apache, and not just any Apache. If he was being followed by soldiers, it meant he was wanted, hunted. "Mrs. Simmons moved swiftly, surprising April. "The cellar," she said, pointing to the trapdoor behind the counter. "Quickly, young man." Uncas hesitated, his eyes meeting April's once more. In that gaze was a question, a plea. Despite her anger, despite the pain of a year's separation, April knew her answer. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Go," she urged, already moving to help him lift the trapdoor. "I'll deal with them." As Uncas disappeared into the darkness below, April caught his hand. For one heartbeat they were connected again, skin to skin, pulse to pulse. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," she whispered fiercely. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I did not expect forgiveness, April Miller. Only a chance to earn it." Then he was gone, descending into the cellar as the sound of boots on the porch announced the arrival of the patrol. April closed the trapdoor, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Mrs. Simmons gave her a long, searching look. "You know what you're doing, child?" April straightened her spine, smoothing down her dress. "No," she admitted quietly, "but I know what I'm feeling." The door burst open, bringing with it a gust of snow and 3 blue-uniformed men whose hands rested too casually on their holstered pistols. "Evening, ma'am," the lead soldier said, removing his hat. His eyes swept the room with practiced efficiency. "Lieutenant James Wilson, United States Army. Sorry to disturb you in this weather, but we're tracking a dangerous Apache. Seen anyone pass through?" April met his gaze steadily, feeling the weight of Uncas's presence below her feet, the weight of his promise in her heart. "No, Lieutenant," she replied, her voice remarkably calm. "No one's come through here all day. The storm's kept everyone away." The lieutenant's eyes narrowed slightly, but his manner remained cordial. "Mind if we take a look around? This Apache we're after is particularly cunning. He's wanted for attacks on several settlements along the frontier. Goes by the name of Uncas." April's heart stuttered, but her face remained impassive. "Of course, Lieutenant, though I'm afraid you won't find anything but dry goods and some of Mrs. Simmons' apple pie cooling in the kitchen." As the soldiers began their search, April caught Mrs. Simmons' eye. The older woman gave her a slight nod, a silent promise of solidarity that surprised and touched April deeply. Outside, the blizzard intensified, howling like a wounded beast. Inside, April Miller stood her ground, a different kind of storm brewing within her. Uncas had returned, bringing with him danger and heartache and the rekindling of a flame she'd tried desperately to extinguish. The year of tears was over. Now began a time of fire. The soldiers searched thoroughly, their boots heavy on the wooden floorboards above Uncas's head. April moved through the trading post with practiced ease, answering Lieutenant Wilson's questions with a calm she didn't feel. "Your father owns this place?" Wilson asked, examining a shelf of tobacco tins. "Yes, sir, William Miller. He's in Denver on business." "And it's just you and Mrs. Simmons here?" His eyes held a hint of suspicion. April nodded, folding her hands to hide their slight trembling. Yes, my father should return within the week, weather permitting. Wilson picked up a beaded bracelet from a small display of Indian crafts. Your father trades with the natives? We trade with anyone who has goods to offer or money to spend, Lieutenant, April replied, keeping her voice neutral. My father believes commerce doesn't discriminate. The lieutenant set down the bracelet. Admirable sentiment, though perhaps naive in these times. He turned to face her fully. Miss Miller, are you aware of the Apache called Uncas? April forced herself to maintain eye contact. I've heard stories. Travelers bring news and rumors through here. Not rumors, Miss Miller. This Apache has led raids against settlements from here to the New Mexico territory. He's responsible for the deaths of at least a dozen settlers and soldiers. Wilson's voice hardened. He's not just any savage, he's educated. Speaks English better than some of my men. Makes him all the more dangerous. April's hands clenched tighter. If he's so dangerous, Lieutenant, why haven't you caught him yet? A flash of annoyance crossed Wilson's face. He knows this territory better than we do, and he has sympathizers. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. People who might be fooled by his manner, who might see something noble in him despite his savagery. April held her ground. I imagine such people would be rare in Colorado territory these days, Lieutenant. Not as rare as they should be. Wilson studied her face for a long moment. If you do see or hear anything about this Apache, it would be your duty to inform the army immediately. He's not just a criminal. He's an enemy of civilization itself. I understand my duties, Lieutenant, April replied evenly. After what seemed an eternity, the soldiers concluded their search. Finding nothing, they prepared to leave, though Lieutenant Wilson lingered at the door. The storm's getting worse, he observed. We'll likely make camp nearby and continue our search when it breaks. Don't open your door to strangers tonight, Miss Miller. I never do, Lieutenant, April responded, the irony of her words not lost on her. As the door closed behind them, and the sound of horses faded into the howling wind, April remained still, counting her heartbeats until she was certain they were gone. Only then did she move to the trap door, lifting it to reveal the darkness below. They're gone, she whispered. Uncas emerged from the cellar like a shadow taking form. In the lantern light, April could see him more clearly now. The new hardness in his features, the vigilant set of his shoulders. He moved with the silent grace of a predator, but his eyes, when they met hers, contained the same warmth she remembered. You lied to protect me, he said quietly. I lied to protect myself, April countered, stepping back to put distance between them. If they found you here, what do you think they would do to me? To Mrs. Simmons? Mrs. Simmons appeared from the kitchen, her expression stern but not unkind. They'll be back, mark my words, and your father's due home in a few days. She fixed Uncas with a hard stare. Whatever business you have here, young man, best make it quick. Uncas inclined his head respectfully to the older woman. I thank you for your help. Didn't do it for you, Mrs. Simmons replied bluntly. Did it for her. She nodded toward April. Now I'm going to retire to my room and pretend I don't know there's an Apache wanted by the U.S. Army standing in our store. What happens next is between you two. She turned to leave, then paused. But if you bring harm to this girl, Indian or not, I'll find a way to make you pay for it. When they were alone, the silence between April and Uncas grew heavy with unspoken words. April moved behind the counter, needing the physical barrier. Why are you here, Uncas? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I made a promise, he answered simply. April's dark eyes flashed. A promise. You promised to return, yes. But you also promised to send word when you could. A year, Uncas. A whole year without a single message. There was no safe way, he explained, his deep voice tinged with regret. The army watches the trading posts. Anyone seen carrying messages to or from Apache would be suspected. And what they're saying about you, April challenged. The raids, the killings, is that true too? A muscle tightened in Uncas's jaw. Some of it, not the way they tell it. Then how is it, Uncas? Tell me your truth. He moved closer to the counter, his movements measured as if afraid of startling her. My people are being driven from their lands, pushed into smaller and smaller territories. When we resist, they call it murder. When they kill us, they call it progress. His eyes held hers. I fight to protect my people. Yes, I have killed, but never the innocent. Never women or children. The lieutenant called you educated, said you speak English better than his men. A bitter smile touched Uncas's lips. My father believed knowledge was power. He sent me to a mission school when I was young, thought if I understood the white man's ways, I could help our people navigate the changes coming. His smile faded. He was wrong. Understanding didn't bring acceptance. It only made me more dangerous in their eyes. April absorbed his words, searching his face for the man she had fallen in love with a year ago. He was there, beneath the new hardness and scars. Still Uncas, but tempered by struggle and survival. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why come back now when you're being hunted?" Uncas's gaze intensified. "Because I made a promise to the woman who holds my heart. And because the situation for my people grows worse, the army pushes harder. There is talk of forcing all Apache onto reservations far from here. And what does that have to do with me?" "Everything." Uncas reached across the counter slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed hers, a touch that sent sparks dancing across her skin despite her anger. "I came back for you, April Miller, to ask you to come with me." April's breath caught in her throat. "Come with you? Where?" "South, to New Mexico territory, then perhaps further. There are places the army has not reached, places where a man and woman might live in peace, regardless of their blood." The audacity of his proposal struck April like a physical blow. "You disappear for a year, then return expecting me to abandon everything, my father, my home, my life, to run away with you?" "Not expecting," Uncas corrected gently. "Hoping, praying." April pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. "You can't just walk back into my life and ask such things, Uncas. The world doesn't work that way." "Our world never worked any way that made sense," he countered. "From the moment we met, we defied what was expected, what was allowed." The memory of their first meeting washed over April. She had been collecting herbs along the river when she encountered the tall Apache drinking from the clear water. Instead of fear, she had felt curiosity. Instead of retreating, she had stayed. Their conversation had been halting at first, her formal English meeting, his carefully constructed sentences, but something had sparked between them, something neither could deny. Over months of secret meetings, that spark had grown into a flame that consumed them both. April had learned phrases in Apache. Uncas had recited poetry he had studied at the mission school. They had shared stories, dreams, and eventually hearts. "It was different then," April said, returning to the present. "You weren't being hunted. I wasn't lying to soldiers." "It was always dangerous," Uncas replied. "We just pretended it wasn't." The truth of his words stung. They had lived in a bubble of their own making, ignoring the harsh realities of the world around them. Now those realities had burst their bubble, leaving them exposed to the cold wind of consequence. April turned away, moving to stoke the fire in the small stove that heated the trading post. "You can't stay here. If the soldiers return—" "I know." Uncas's voice was resigned. "I have a camp in the foothills, safe, hidden." "Then why risk coming here at all?" April demanded, turning back to face him. "Why put us in such danger?" "Because a promise made must be kept," Uncas said firmly. "And because—" He hesitated, then continued, his voice lower. "Because I needed to see your face, to know if what we shared was still alive in your heart as it is in mine." April felt tears threatening and fought them back. She would not cry. Not again. Not for him. "And what do you see, Uncas? What does my face tell you?" He studied her, his dark eyes missing nothing. Not the tension in her jaw, the slight tremble of her lips, the way her hands gripped her skirts too tightly. "I see anger," he acknowledged. "Pain, confusion." A pause. "But beneath it all, I see the embers of what once burned between us. Buried, perhaps, but not extinguished." April wanted to deny it, to protect herself from hoping again. But Uncas had always seen too clearly into her soul. "Even if that's true," she said carefully, "embers are not flames. They can die with the smallest breath of wind. Or they can be nurtured back to fire," Uncas countered. "I did not come to force you, April Miller. I came to offer you a choice." "Some choice," April said bitterly. "Stay here and forget you, or abandon everything I've ever known to flee with a man wanted by the army." "Life rarely offers easy choices," Uncas replied, a sad smile touching his lips. "I will be in the foothills for 3 days. If you choose to come with me, follow the creek north until you reach the split rock. I will find you there. And if I don't come," Pain flickered across his features. "Then I will go south alone and trouble you no more." The finality of his words struck April like a physical blow. This was it, the moment that would define her future. Before she could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. Uncas moved with incredible speed, melting into the shadows at the back of the store. April's heart raced as she approached the door. "Who is it?" she called, trying to keep her voice steady. "Miss Miller, it's Lieutenant Wilson again. Sorry to disturb you, but we've found tracks leading this way." April shot a panicked glance toward Uncas, who was already moving toward the back door. He paused, his eyes meeting hers one last time. 3 days, he mouthed silently. Then he was gone, slipping into the snowstorm like a ghost, leaving April to face the lieutenant with secrets burning in her heart and choices looming before her like mountains on the horizon. The next morning dawned clear and blindingly bright, the storm having exhausted itself sometime in the night. April rose early, her sleep having been fitful and plagued by dreams of Uncas, sometimes running through snowy forests, sometimes lying still with blood seeping into white snow around him. Lieutenant Wilson and his men had searched the area around the trading post after their return the previous night, but the heavy snowfall had obscured any tracks. They'd left unsatisfied but suspicious, Wilson promising to return the following day. April moved through her morning chores mechanically, her mind churning with thoughts of Uncas's offer. Leave everything behind, start anew in some distant place. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. "You're quiet this morning," Mrs. Simmons observed as they worked together in the kitchen. "Thinking about that Apache, I suppose." April looked up, startled. "I thought you were pretending not to know he was here," the older woman snorted. "Pretending for their benefit, not yours." She kneaded bread dough with practiced movements. "What did he want with you, child? And don't tell me it was just to keep a promise." April hesitated, then decided Mrs. Simmons deserved the truth. "He asked me to go with him, to leave here and travel south." Mrs. Simmons' hands stilled in the dough. "Leave your father, your home, everything you know." She shook her head. "That's madness, girl." "Is it?" April challenged quietly. "What future do I have here, Mrs. Simmons? Marry some local boy who sees me as nothing more than a convenient match? Spend my days keeping house while he drinks away his frustrations at the saloon? And what kind of future would you have with an Apache warrior?" Mrs. Simmons countered. "Always running, always hiding, always afraid." "At least it would be my choice," April said, her voice stronger now. "My life, lived on my terms." Mrs. Simmons wiped her hands on her apron, her expression softening. "Oh, child, I know what it's like to have your heart pull you one way while the world pulls you another. But this isn't just about following your heart. This is dangerous." "I know," April admitted. "But The bell above the store's door interrupted her. April quickly composed herself and went to greet whoever had arrived. A young man in threadbare clothes stood just inside the door, nervously twisting his hat in his hands. April recognized him as Harvey Reed, whose family had a small homestead about 5 miles east. "Morning, Miss Miller," he said, bobbing his head respectfully. "Pa sent me to get some supplies. Flour and coffee mainly. Maybe some sugar if you can spare it." "Of course, Harvey," April replied, moving behind the counter. "How is your family faring after the storm?" "Well enough, miss, though Pa's worried about the Apache they say is in these parts." Harvey lowered his voice. "Soldiers came by yesterday warning everyone to be on alert, said he's dangerous as they come." April's hands faltered slightly as she measured flour into a sack. "I'm sure the army will handle the situation. Pa says we shouldn't count on the army for nothing, says we might have to take matters into our own hands." Harvey leaned forward, eager to share the news. "There's talk of forming a militia, local men banding together to hunt down this Apache. There's even a bounty now, $500 for him, dead or alive." April felt sick but kept her expression neutral. "That seems extreme." "Not for what he's done," Harvey insisted. "Pa says this one's crafty, educated, makes him worse than the others 'cause he knows better. Says—" The door opened again, the bell jingling sharply. Lieutenant Wilson entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. "Miss Miller," he greeted, then nodded to Harvey. "Young Reed." "Lieutenant," they both responded. Wilson glanced around the store. "I trust the night passed uneventfully?" Yes, sir, April replied. Just the usual quiet. Wilson nodded, then turned to Harvey. Your father joining the search party this afternoon? Harvey straightened, clearly trying to appear older than his 16 years. Yes, sir. Pa's bringing his tracking dogs, too. Good man. Wilson returned his attention to April. Miss Miller, I wanted to inform you that we're expanding our search, that Apache Uncas was spotted near Ridgeline Creek yesterday evening. We believe he's still in the area. April maintained her composure, though her heart raced. Ridgeline Creek was barely a mile from the trading post. I see. Well, I hope you find him quickly, Lieutenant, for everyone's safety. Indeed. Wilson studied her face. Miss Miller, forgive my directness, but I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. You seemed defensive when I mentioned this particular Apache. April raised her chin slightly. I assure you, Lieutenant, I have no reason to feel defensive about someone I've never met. Of course, Wilson said smoothly. It's just that, well, there have been stories about a white woman seen with this Apache some time ago, before he became so notorious. He watched her closely. Trading posts like this one, frontier places, they sometimes become meeting points between worlds that should remain separate. April felt cold fear spread through her veins, but kept her expression impassive. If you're implying something about me or my father's business, Lieutenant, I'd appreciate you speaking plainly. Wilson smiled slightly. Nothing specific, Miss Miller. Just making conversation. He placed his hat back on his head. We'll be searching the eastern ridges today. If you see or hear anything unusual, fire 3 shots in the air. We'll come running. After Wilson left, Harvey finished his purchase quickly and departed, clearly eager to tell his father about the exchange he had witnessed. When they were alone again, Mrs. Simmons emerged from the back room. That soldier suspects something, she said quietly. April nodded, her hands trembling slightly, now that she no longer needed to maintain her facade. He knows, or at least suspects, about me and Uncas. Someone must have seen us together last year. Mrs. Simmons sighed heavily. This gets more dangerous by the hour, child. I know. April moved to the window, staring out at the brilliant white landscape. Somewhere out there, Uncas was hiding, waiting, hoping. Mrs. Simmons, if I were to leave, would you tell my father why? The older woman was silent for a long moment. You're truly considering it, then? Going with him? April turned, meeting the housekeeper's concerned gaze. I don't know. I only know that since he walked through that door yesterday, I felt more alive than I have in a year. Mrs. Simmons shook her head slowly. It's not my place to tell you what to do with your heart, child, but think carefully, very carefully. This isn't some romance from those novels you read. This is life and death. I know, April whispered, turning back to the window. Believe me, I know. As afternoon stretched toward evening, April found herself increasingly restless. The trading post had seen a steady stream of customers, many coming as much for news about the Apache hunt as for supplies. Each time the door opened, April tensed, half expecting to see soldiers dragging Uncas' captured form. When the last customer had gone, and Mrs. Simmons had retired to her room complaining of a headache, April made a decision. She needed to see Uncas, to speak with him away from the pressure and fear of discovery. Not to join him, not yet, but to understand better what he was proposing, what life might look like if she chose him. She waited until full dark, then dressed warmly, pulling on her heaviest coat, gloves and boots. She left a note for Mrs. Simmons, saying she needed air and had gone for a short walk. Then, with a lantern in hand and a small pistol tucked into her pocket, a precaution her father had insisted upon, April slipped out into the night. The cold air bit at her cheeks as she made her way toward Ridgeline Creek. The snow had hardened into a crust that crunched beneath her boots. The nearly full moon cast everything in silver light, making lanterns almost unnecessary, except in the deepest shadows of the pine forest. April knew she was taking a terrible risk. If the army patrol found her, she'd have no good explanation for wandering alone at night. If local settlers spotted her, rumors would fly faster than arrows. But the need to see Uncas to continue their interrupted conversation overrode her caution. She followed the creek northward, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The split rock Uncas had mentioned was about 2 miles upstream, too far for her to travel tonight, but she hoped that if he was watching, as she suspected he might be, he would see her and understand her intent. After walking for perhaps half an hour, April paused in a small clearing beside the creek. The water gurgled beneath a thin sheet of ice, creating a peaceful counterpoint to her troubled thoughts. She held her lantern higher, scanning the tree line. "Uncas?" she called softly, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the water. "Uncas, are you there?" Silence answered her. April waited, listening to the night sounds, the creek, the occasional distant call of an owl, the soft sigh of wind through pine branches. She was about to call again when a sensation, more instinct than anything else, made her turn sharply. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by the shadow of a large pine. "Uncas?" April whispered, hope rising in her chest. The figure moved forward, and April's hope turned to ice in her veins. Not Uncas, but Lieutenant Wilson, his uniform dark against the snow. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of triumph and disappointment. "Out for a midnight stroll, are we?" April struggled to keep her voice steady. "Lieutenant, you startled me." "I imagine I did." Wilson stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "Curious place for a young lady to be walking alone at night." "I needed air," April said, repeating what she'd written to Mrs. Simmons. "The trading post gets stifling after a full day." "And you just happened to walk north along Ridgeline Creek?" Wilson's voice hardened. "The same creek where tracks were spotted yesterday. The same direction a person might go if they were trying to reach the foothills where an Apache might be hiding." "I don't know what you're implying, Lieutenant," April said, her hand instinctively moving toward the pocket where her small pistol was hidden. "I think you do." Wilson took another step forward. "I think you know exactly where the Apache called Uncas is hiding. I think you're trying to warn him, or maybe even help him escape." His eyes narrowed. "You're the woman from the stories, aren't you? The white woman seen with him last year." April's silence was answer enough. Wilson shook his head slowly. "I didn't want to believe it. William Miller's daughter, consorting with a savage. Do you know what that makes you, Miss Miller?" "A human being," April replied, finding her voice at last. "One who sees beyond the color of a man's skin or the language of his birth." "It makes you a traitor," Wilson spat. "To your race, to your country, to civilization itself." April's chin lifted. "If civilization means hating and killing those who are different, perhaps it deserves betrayal." Wilson's face darkened with anger. "You'll tell me where he is, Miss Miller. Now, or I'll arrest you for aiding a wanted criminal." "I don't know where he is," April said truthfully. She only knew where he would be in 3 days' time, at the Split Rock. "I don't believe you." Wilson's hand moved from his holster to grasp his pistol. "And I don't have time for games. Men are dying while you protect this savage." "He's not a savage," April said, her voice rising with emotion. "He's a man fighting for his people's survival against impossible odds. Something I imagine you might understand, Lieutenant, if your own home and family were threatened." Wilson's laugh was cold. "Save your noble savage speeches, Miss Miller. I've buried too many good men to be moved by such sentimentality." His grip tightened on his pistol. "Now I'll ask once more. Where is he hiding?" The sound of a twig snapping in the forest behind Wilson made them both freeze. The lieutenant spun, raising his weapon toward the darkness between the trees. "Show yourself!" Wilson called, his voice ringing through the clearing. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, like a shadow separating from the night, Uncas stepped into the moonlight. He wore buckskins that blended with the forest, a knife at his belt but no other visible weapons. His dark eyes took in the scene in an instant, April's frightened stance, Wilson's drawn pistol. "I am here," Uncas said calmly, his hands held slightly away from his body. "Leave the woman be, your quarrel is with me." Wilson's pistol shifted to target Uncas's chest. "Uncas, by order of the United States Army, you are under arrest for murder, raiding, and insurrection against the government." "What you call insurrection, I call survival," Uncas replied, his voice steady despite the weapon aimed at his heart. His gaze moved to April. "Are you harmed?" She shook her head slightly, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself, but for him. "How touching," Wilson sneered, the savage concerned for his white woman. He kept his pistol trained on Uncas while reaching to his belt with his free hand, producing a set of manacles. "On your knees, Apache. Hands behind your back." Uncas remained standing, his dignity undiminished by the threat. "And if I refuse, then I'll shoot you where you stand and collect the bounty all the same," Wilson replied coldly. "Dead or alive makes no difference to me." April's heart pounded in her chest. "Lieutenant, please, silence," Wilson snapped, not taking his eyes off Uncas. "You've betrayed your own kind, Miss Miller. You'll face your own consequences when this is done." In that moment, April made her decision. Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the small pistol her father had given her, for protection. With a swift motion, she drew it and pointed it at Lieutenant Wilson's back. "Lower your weapon," she commanded, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. Wilson tensed but didn't turn. "You won't shoot me, Miss Miller. You're not a killer." "I don't want to be," April agreed, her grip tightening on the pistol. "But I will not stand by and watch you murder him." A tense silence fell over the clearing. The tableau held for several heartbeats, Wilson aiming at Uncas, April aiming at Wilson, and Uncas watching them both with an expression of calm resolve. Then, with a speed that took April's breath away, Uncas moved. He lunged forward, ducking beneath Wilson's aim. The lieutenant fired, his shot going wide as Uncas tackled him to the ground. The two men grappled in the snow, Wilson's pistol spinning away across the frozen ground. April stood frozen, her own small gun now useless with the men locked in close combat. Wilson was larger, heavier, with military training, but Uncas fought with the fluid grace of a lifetime spent surviving. They rolled across the snow, fists connecting with flesh, grunts of pain punctuating the night silence. Wilson managed to draw a knife from his boot, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. He slashed at Uncas, who barely evaded the strike, the blade catching his arm and drawing a thin line of crimson against the white snow. Uncas responded by driving his elbow into Wilson's throat, causing the lieutenant to gag and loosen his grip. In a swift reversal, Uncas gained the upper hand, pinning Wilson to the ground and immobilizing the hand that held the knife. For a moment, they stared at each other, both breathing heavily, hatred and understanding passing between them in equal measure. "Do it," Wilson wheezed, his eyes defiant despite his vulnerable position. "Prove me right. Show her what you really are." Uncas held Wilson's gaze. "What I am," he said quietly, "is not what you believe." He twisted Wilson's wrist until the knife fell from his grasp, then struck the lieutenant with a precise blow to the temple that rendered him unconscious, but alive. Rising to his feet, Uncas turned to April, blood seeping from the cut on his arm and various smaller wounds from the fight. "We must go," he said urgently. "Others will have heard the shot." April stood rooted to the spot, the reality of what had just occurred, what she had just done, crashing over her like ice water. She had pointed a weapon at a United States Army officer. She had sided with a wanted man against her own government. There was no going back now. "April," Uncas said more gently, approaching her slowly, "we have little time." She looked down at the unconscious form of Lieutenant Wilson, then at the small pistol still clutched in her hand. "What have I done?" she whispered. "You chose," Uncas said simply. He reached out, carefully taking the pistol from her trembling fingers. "Now we must live with that choice." The sound of distant voices calling through the forest spurred April to action. She straightened her spine, gathering her courage. "My things," she said, her mind racing. "At the trading post, and Mrs. Simmons. I can't just disappear." "There is no time for the trading post," Uncas replied, already moving toward the deeper woods. "But we can circle around to say farewell to Mrs. Simmons. Then we must ride south immediately." April cast one last glance at Lieutenant Wilson, then followed Uncas into the forest, leaving behind footprints in the snow that told a story of choices made and a life forever changed. The journey back to the trading post was tense and hurried, with Uncas leading April through the forest by paths she would never have found on her own. They moved in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the gravity of their situation hanging between them like a physical presence. As they neared the trading post, Uncas halted at the edge of the tree line. The building stood dark and quiet, a single lamp burning in the kitchen window. "Wait here," April whispered. "I'll speak to Mrs. Simmons and gather what I can quickly." Uncas nodded, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Be swift. The soldier will be found soon, if he hasn't already awakened." April moved across the open yard, her heart in her throat. The back door opened before she reached it, revealing Mrs. Simmons in her nightgown and shawl, a worried expression on her lined face. "Child, where have you been? I found your note and—" The older woman stopped, taking in April's disheveled appearance and the intensity in her eyes. "What's happened?" April stepped inside, closing the door behind her. In hurried whispers, she explained the confrontation with Lieutenant Wilson, Uncas's intervention, and her decision to flee with him. "Mrs." Simmons listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When April finished, the older woman sighed deeply. "So it's done then? You've made your choice?" "I have," April confirmed, already moving to gather essential items. A change of clothes, her mother's locket, what little money she had saved. "I'm sorry to leave you to face the consequences." Mrs. Simmons waved away her concern. "I'll be fine. They can't prove I knew anything. I'll tell your father." She paused, considering. "I'll tell him the truth, that you followed your heart for better or worse." April paused in her hurried packing, tears threatening. "Will you hate me for this? For abandoning you and father?" The older woman's weathered face softened. "Hate you? Oh, child." She pulled April into a fierce embrace. "I could never hate you. Fear for you, yes. Worry endlessly, certainly. But hate, never." April clung to the woman who had been like a second mother to her since her own had passed years before. "I have to go," she whispered. "I love him, Mrs. Simmons. Despite everything, I love him." Mrs. Simmons released her, wiping a tear from her cheek. Love is both the simplest and most complicated thing in this world. She moved quickly to the pantry, gathering dried meat, bread, and other provisions into a cloth sack. "Take this. And this." She pressed a small leather pouch into April's hand. "My savings. Not much, but it might help." "I can't," April began. "You can and you will," Mrs. Simmons interrupted firmly. "Now go, before those soldiers return." With a final embrace, and tears streaming freely now, April slipped back out into the night, carrying her hastily packed belongings. She found Uncas where she'd left him, vigilant and waiting. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. Uncas studied her face in the moonlight, reaching out to gently brush away a tear. "Are you certain, April Miller? Once we leave, there is no returning to the life you knew." April took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I know, but the life I knew was incomplete without you in it." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready, Uncas, lead the way." A rare smile touched his lips, transforming his stern features. He took her hand, and together they vanished into the forest, heading toward an uncertain future but one they would face together. 3 days later, April stood beside a small campfire in a sheltered canyon far from the trading post, watching as Uncas prepared the 2 horses they had acquired for their journey south. Her body ached from hours in the saddle, riding through terrain she would once have considered impassable. Her hands, once soft from a life of relative comfort, were already developing calluses from the rough work of survival. Yet despite the physical discomfort, despite the constant fear of pursuit, April felt a strange sense of freedom. The weight of societal expectations had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by the more immediate concerns of food, shelter, and safety. "We should reach the border of New Mexico territory by tomorrow evening," Uncas said, securing their supplies to one of the horses. "There is a place there, a valley my father spoke of, sheltered with good water and hunting. Few white men know of it." April nodded, watching the flames dance. "And then?" Uncas paused in his work, studying her across the fire. "And then we make a life, April Miller. A life of our own making, not one dictated by others." "Will it be enough?" she asked softly, voicing the question that had haunted her since their flight began. "Just the 2 of us, always hiding, always looking over our shoulders." Uncas moved around the fire to stand before her, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "For now it must be, but perhaps in time the world will change, or we will find others who see as we see, who judge by the heart and not the skin." April wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe in a future where they could live openly, without fear. But the realities they had faced these past days, narrowly avoiding army patrols, skirting settlements where bounty hunters might lurk, made such a future seem distant indeed. "What of your people?" she asked. "You left them to come back for me. Will you not return to them?" A shadow passed over Uncas's face. "My people are scattered now. Those who haven't been killed or captured have fled far south or deep into the mountains. The tribe I was born to exists now only in memory. The pain in his voice touched April deeply. She reached for his hand, entwining her fingers with his. I'm sorry. I can't imagine such loss. It is the way of these times, Uncas replied, his voice steady despite the sadness in his eyes. The old world dies. Something new is born from its ashes. What matters is that we carry forward what is worthy. Honor, courage, love. His grip tightened on hers. These things cannot be taken, even when all else is lost. April leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. When I was a little girl, my father used to tell me stories of pioneers heading west to start new lives. I never imagined I would become one of them, fleeing east instead of west, with an Apache warrior as my companion. A small smile touched Uncas's lips. Life seldom follows the stories we are told as children. No, April agreed, it doesn't. But perhaps that's for the better. Perhaps we get to write our own stories instead. Uncas was about to respond when he suddenly tensed, his head turning sharply toward the canyon entrance. In an instant, his entire demeanor changed, the tender moment giving way to the alertness of a hunted man. "What is it?" April whispered, immediately dropping her voice. "Horses," Uncas replied, already moving to douse their fire, several riders moving fast. Fear clutched at April's heart. "Soldiers? Perhaps, or bounty hunters." Uncas worked swiftly, gathering their few possessions. "We must move deeper into the canyon. There are caves where we can hide until they pass." They worked quickly, practiced now after days on the run. Within minutes the fire was extinguished, their presence obscured. Uncas led the horses while April followed, picking their way carefully through the darkness toward the back of the narrow canyon. They had almost reached the caves when the sound of a rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls. April felt Uncas push her roughly toward a cluster of boulders just as another shot rang out, sending stone chips flying dangerously close to where they crouched. "Stay down," Uncas ordered, his voice a harsh whisper. He drew the rifle they had taken from Lieutenant Wilson's horse 3 days prior, checking its load. "Uncas, Apache," a voice called from the direction of the canyon entrance. "We know you're in there. Come out now, and we might let the woman live." April's blood ran cold. It wasn't soldiers, at least not only soldiers. The voice belonged to Harvey Reed's father, Harold. The militia Wilson had mentioned had caught up with them. 8 riders, Uncas murmured, having peered briefly around their shelter. "Armed, spread across the canyon mouth." "What do we do?" April asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Uncas' expression was grim in the faint moonlight. "The caves connect through the mountain. There is a path, difficult but passable. It leads out to the eastern slope. And the horses? We must leave them." Uncas's hand found hers in the darkness. "It will mean harder travel, but we have no choice." Another shot struck near their position, followed by Harold Reed's voice again. "Last chance, Apache. Surrender or we start shooting to kill." Uncas turned to April, his eyes intense. "Go to the largest cave, straight back. Follow the left-hand passage until you reach water. Wait for me there." April clutched his arm. "What are you going to do?" "Buy us time," he replied grimly. "Go now, quickly and quietly." "I won't leave you," April protested. "You must," Uncas insisted. "Trust me, April Miller. I did not come back for you, only to lose you now." He pressed a quick, fierce kiss to her lips. "Go." Heart pounding, April slipped away toward the caves, staying low and using the boulders for cover. Behind her, she heard Uncas fire a shot toward the canyon entrance, followed by shouts of alarm from the pursuers. The cave mouth loomed dark against the rock face. April entered cautiously, the absolute darkness swallowing her. She felt her way forward, one hand on the rough stone wall, the other extended before her. The sound of gunfire outside echoed strangely in the confined space, making it impossible to tell how the confrontation was progressing. Following Uncas's instructions, she took the left passage when she felt the tunnel branch. The ground sloped downward, the air growing damper and cooler. After what seemed an eternity of careful progress through the darkness, she heard the soft sound of running water. April paused, listening intently. Behind her, the sounds of gunfire had faded, either with distance or because the shooting had stopped. She could not tell which, and the uncertainty clawed at her. "Uncas?" she called softly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet seeming thunderous in the confined space. No answer came. April sank down beside the underground stream, her back against the cold stone wall. She would wait, as he had instructed. She would trust him to find her. What other choice did she have? Time passed with agonizing slowness. Without light, without any reference point, minutes might have been hours. April found herself straining to hear any sound of approach, any indication that Uncas had escaped their pursuers and was coming for her. Instead, she heard only the gentle gurgle of the stream and the occasional drip of water from the cave ceiling. Her mind conjured terrible images. Uncas wounded, Uncas captured, Uncas lying dead in the canyon with his blood staining the stones. No, she whispered to herself. He will come. He promised. As if summoned by her faith, a faint scraping sound reached her ears. April froze, listening intently. It came again, the sound of cautious movement through the tunnel. "Uncas!" she called, slightly louder this time. The movement paused, then quickened. A moment later, a hand found her shoulder in the darkness, and April nearly sobbed with relief. "It's me," Uncas confirmed, his voice a welcome sound in the blackness. April reached for him blindly, her hands connecting with solid flesh, feeling the reassuring warmth of him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Scratches only," Uncas replied, though something in his voice suggested he was minimizing his injuries. "I led them on a false trail, then doubled back to the caves. They are searching the western slopes now. Will they find this passage?" "Not likely. Few know of its existence." Uncas shifted beside her. "We should rest here until daybreak, then continue east instead of south as they will expect." April leaned against him, the adrenaline of fear gradually giving way to exhaustion. "How long can we keep running, Uncas? They seem determined to hunt you to the ends of the earth." Uncas was silent for a long moment. "Not forever," he finally said, "but perhaps long enough to reach Apache lands far south, or perhaps to find a place so remote they will eventually abandon the hunt." It wasn't the most reassuring answer, but April appreciated his honesty. "I don't regret it," she said quietly. "Coming with you. Whatever happens, I need you to know that." His arm tightened around her. "Nor do I regret returning for you, April Miller. Some things are worth any risk." They fell silent then, two figures huddled together in the absolute darkness of the cave, listening to the soft murmur of the underground stream. Outside, men with hatred in their hearts searched for them. Beyond that, an uncertain future awaited. But in that moment, in that place between worlds, they had found a temporary haven, and for now, that was enough. Dawn found them emerging from a narrow cave, opening on the eastern slope of the mountains. The sun rose before them, painting the distant plains in hues of gold and rose. April stood for a moment, blinking in the sudden light, taking in the vast expanse that stretched toward the horizon. Uncas moved with a slight stiffness that confirmed April's suspicion that he had indeed been injured during the confrontation. A dark stain on his buckskin shirt, just below his ribs on the left side, spoke of a wound he had not mentioned. "You're hurt," she said, reaching toward the stain. Uncas caught her hand gently. "A graze only. It has stopped bleeding." April frowned, not believing him entirely, but recognizing that now was not the time to argue. "Let me at least bind it properly when we stop." He nodded, his eyes scanning the terrain spread before them. "We must find water first, then shelter for the day. We'll travel by night until we're well away from this area." Without horses, their progress would be slower, their supplies more limited. But they had survived this far, and April found a growing confidence in her ability to adapt to this new life. She had always been a quick learner, and under Uncas' patient guidance, she was beginning to understand the rhythms of the wilderness, the signs that indicated water, shelter, danger. They descended the eastern slope carefully, mindful of loose rocks that might betray their presence to any watchers. By mid-morning, they had reached a small stream where they refilled their water skins, and Uncas caught 2 fish with a swiftness that still amazed April. As they ate their simple meal beside the stream, April studied Uncas's profile against the backdrop of the mountains they had crossed. The past days had changed him subtly, or perhaps it was simply that she was seeing new facets of him. The careful tenderness with which he treated her, the fierce protectiveness when danger threatened, the quiet patience as he taught her the ways of survival. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. April smiled slightly. "That I never truly knew you until now. Before, when we would meet by the river, it was like a dream. This—" she gestured to their surroundings, to their meager belongings, to the miles they had traveled together. This is real. Uncas considered her words. And is the reality disappointing compared to the dream? No, April said honestly. Different, harder in many ways, but not disappointing. She reached for his hand. In the dream, we could only share moments. In the reality, we share a life. However difficult, that is worth more. Something in Uncas's expression softened, the constant vigilance giving way briefly to a tender vulnerability that few ever witnessed. You continue to surprise me, April Miller. Many women raised as you were would have broken by now under such hardships. Perhaps I'm stronger than I appear, April suggested, a hint of pride in her voice. Perhaps you are exactly as strong as I always knew you to be, Uncas countered. It is why I came back for you, not to rescue you, but to invite you to walk beside me as an equal. The words warmed April deeply. In the world she had left behind, women were rarely viewed as equals, particularly by men. Uncas, for all the differences between their backgrounds, saw her more clearly than any man of her own society ever had. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the distant sound of a bird call that April had come to recognize as a warning signal among Uncas's people. Uncas tensed immediately, his head turning toward the sound. "Someone approaches," he said quietly, already gathering their few belongings. "From the west." "Trackers?" April asked, fear churning in her stomach. Uncas shook his head slightly. "The call was Apache, my people." He seemed uncertain, which was unusual for him. "It could be a trap. The army has been known to force captured Apache to help track others. What do we do?" Uncas considered for a moment. "We acknowledge, but cautiously." He stood, moving to a more exposed position, and returned the bird call with a subtle variation that April couldn't have replicated if she tried. Then he waited, one hand near his knife, his body positioned protectively between April and the potential threat. Several tense minutes passed before a figure appeared at the edge of the tree line across the stream. A man, dressed similarly to Uncas, with the same proud bearing. He raised a hand in greeting, speaking words in Apache that April did not understand. Uncas responded in the same language, his posture relaxing slightly, but not completely. A conversation followed, too rapid and foreign for April to follow, though she caught her own name mentioned several times. Finally, Uncas turned to her. "This is Nantai, son of my father's brother. He brings news." April stood, smoothing her travel-worn dress nervously. "What news?" Uncas exchanged a few more words with his cousin before answering. "The army is pulling back from this region. Most of the soldiers have been ordered north to deal with Sioux resistance. The hunt for us may be less intense than we feared." Relief washed through April. "So we might not need to run as far?" "Perhaps not," Uncas agreed. "Nantai also says there is a small band of our people, mostly women, children and elders, camped in a hidden valley 3 days' journey southeast. They prepare to travel further south to join with other Apache bands near the Mexican border." April understood the unspoken question. "You want to join them? To help them?" Uncas studied her face carefully. "It would be safer than traveling alone, but it would mean living as Apache, April. Not all would welcome you easily." April considered what this would mean, not just running away with Uncas, but joining his people, becoming part of a community that might view her with suspicion or outright hostility, learning a new language, new customs, a completely new way of life. Yet the alternative, continuing alone, always running, always hiding, seemed equally daunting. "Would you teach me?" she asked finally. "Your language? Your ways?" Something like hope flickered in Uncas's eyes. "If you are willing to learn." April straightened her shoulders, making her decision. "Then we go southeast, to your people." Uncas translated for Nantai, who looked at April with newfound respect. He said something that made Uncas smile slightly. "What did he say?" April asked. "He said you have the spirit of an Apache woman," Uncas translated. "Stubborn as the mountain, but flowing like water when needed." April couldn't help but smile at that. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It was meant as one," Uncas assured her. He spoke again to Nantai, who nodded and began to move downstream, indicating they should follow. As they gathered their belongings to follow Nantai, April felt a strange sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges she could hardly imagine, But for the first time since leaving the trading post, she felt they were moving toward something, not merely running away. They were moving toward a future that neither of them could have envisioned a year ago, when Uncas had left her in tears beside a snow-covered river. A future they would build together, day by day, choice by choice. April took Uncas' hand as they began to walk, following Nantai downstream toward whatever awaited them. The sun climbed higher in the eastern sky, warming their backs, casting their shadows before them like promises stretching toward the horizon. Behind them lay the past, the trading post, Lieutenant Wilson, the bounty hunters, the world that had declared their love forbidden. Ahead lay uncertainty, hardship, and prejudice still to be overcome. But between them, connecting them despite all obstacles, flowed something stronger than fear, more enduring than hatred, more powerful than any force that sought to tear them apart. It was for this that Uncas had returned, braving danger and death. It was for this that April had left behind everything familiar, not for a dream or a fantasy, but for the chance to forge something real and lasting in a world determined to deny them that chance. As they walked toward the rising sun, April felt Uncas's hand tighten around hers. She squeezed back, a silent affirmation of all they had risked, all they had endured, and all they had yet to face together. The Apache warrior and the merchant's daughter, defying a world that said they could not exist, creating their own path where none had been before. Their story, like the land through which they traveled, was wild, untamed, and full of both peril and promise. But it was theirs, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, Apache lands, near the Mexican border. April sat cross-legged outside the small wickiup she now called home, her nimble fingers working deftly with the reeds she was weaving into a basket. The afternoon sun warmed her shoulders, bronzed now from months of outdoor living. Her once neat dress had long since been replaced by buckskin clothing, adorned with beadwork she had painstakingly created under the guidance of the tribal women. Those same women who had initially regarded her with suspicion now treated her with a cautious acceptance, impressed by her willingness to learn their ways, her quick mastery of basic Apache phrases, and perhaps most importantly, the obvious depth of Uncas's love for her. Shiyaji, April practiced under her breath using the Apache endearment Uncas had taught her. My little one. Her hand drifted to her belly, where the first subtle swelling had begun to show. Their child, a bridge between two worlds, a promise for the future. Movement at the edge of the camp caught her attention. Uncas approached, returning from a hunting expedition with several other men. Even from a distance, April could distinguish him from the others. Something in the way he carried himself, the particular rhythm of his stride that her heart recognized before her eyes, could confirm it was him. He spotted her and altered his course, coming directly to where she sat. As he drew closer, April noted with satisfaction that he moved without the stiffness that had plagued him during their journey south. The bullet graze he had received during their escape had healed well, leaving only a thin scar to join the others that mapped his body's history. Shijeye, she greeted him, using one of the few Apache phrases she could pronounce correctly. My heart. Uncas smiled, the expression transforming his often solemn features. Your accent improves, he said, switching to English. Though they spoke primarily Apache when among the tribe, they still used English in private moments, maintaining this connection to April's past. The women laugh less when I speak now, April replied with a small grin, though I still mangle half the words. Uncas settled beside her, watching her hands work the reeds. You learn quickly, faster than I learned English at the mission school. April's fingers stilled. Do you ever regret it, bringing me here? It was a question she rarely voiced, though it sometimes haunted her in the quiet hours before dawn. Uncas considered her question with the thoughtfulness that was so characteristic of him. No, he said finally, though I regret the hardships you have faced because of me. Not because of you, April corrected gently. Because of a world that fears what it doesn't understand. She resumed her weaving. Besides, for every hardship there has been a joy. Like this. She took his hand and placed it on her belly. Uncas's eyes widened slightly. You are certain? April nodded, a smile blooming on her face. The old healer confirmed it yesterday. Come spring, there will be a new voice in our wickiup. Wonder and concern battled in Uncas's expression. A child of two worlds. The path will not be easy. No path worth traveling ever is, April replied, echoing words Uncas himself had spoken during their flight from Colorado. They sat in companionable silence for a time, April working her basket, Uncas occasionally touching her belly with a reverence that made her heart swell. Around them, the camp hummed with the everyday activities of the band, children playing, women working, men preparing for the evening meal. It was not the life April had been raised to expect. It lacked the comforts of the trading post, the security of settled existence, but it offered freedoms she had never known before, to love openly, to choose her own path, to build something new rather than merely inheriting the old. A letter came, Uncas said eventually, reaching into his leather pouch. From your Mrs. Simmons. April's hands trembled slightly as she took the folded paper. Letters were rare and precious things, carried by trusted traders who moved between the white and Apache worlds. This was only the second she had received since leaving Colorado. She opened it carefully, reading the neat handwriting that brought Mrs. Simmons' voice so clearly to mind. My dearest April, I pray this finds you well and safe. Your father asks after you constantly, though his anger has softened somewhat with time. The trading post continues as always, though it feels empty without your presence. Lieutenant Wilson was eventually reassigned after his failure to capture you and your Apache. The bounties have been withdrawn as the Army focuses its attention elsewhere. I believe you could visit someday if you wished without immediate danger, though I understand if that day is far in the future. I miss you terribly, child, but I take comfort in knowing you followed your heart. In these uncertain times, perhaps that is the only true compass we have. With enduring affection, Mrs. Simmons, P.S. Your father would never admit it, but I caught him looking at Apache children in town the other day with the strangest expression. Perhaps grandchildren have a way of healing old wounds that nothing else can. April folded the letter, blinking back tears. The possibility of reconciliation, however distant, was more than she had dared hope for. Good news? Uncas asked gently. Perhaps someday, April replied. She tucked the letter away carefully. The bounties are withdrawn, the hunt has ended. Uncas nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps, when the child is older, we might journey north again. Not to stay, but to visit. To show your father his grandchild. The suggestion took April by surprise. Would you risk that? After everything? For you, and for our child? Yes. Uncas took her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. Our peoples must find ways to live together, April Miller. Perhaps it begins with small bridges, like the one we have built. April looked around at the camp, at the people who had gradually accepted her, at the life she and Uncas had forged together against all odds. Then she looked back at the man beside her, whose return had stopped her heart a year ago and set it beating to a new rhythm. I would like that, she said softly, to build bridges instead of walls, to show our child both worlds and let them find their own path between them. Uncas reached out, tucking a strand of her dark hair behind her ear with a tenderness that still made her breath catch. You have the courage of 10 warriors, April Miller. She laughed lightly. I'm not sure the tribe would agree. They already do, Uncas assured her. They have named you in their own language. Did you know this? April's eyes widened. No. What do they call me? Ishkitene Ba, Uncas replied. The woman who walks between fires, because you left the fires of your people to join the fires of ours, yet you carry both flames within you. Tears pricked at April's eyes. She had not expected this acknowledgement, this acceptance from the tribe. I don't know what to say. There is nothing to say, Uncas replied. It is who you are, who you have always been, perhaps, even before we met. He placed his hand once more on her belly. And it is who our child will be as well. Neither fully of one world nor the other, but something new, something stronger. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the camp, April leaned against Uncas's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her. Behind them lay a past filled with separation and tears. Around them, a present hard-won through courage and sacrifice. Before them, a future uncertain, but facing it together. I never told you, April said suddenly, what I thought when you appeared at the trading post door that day, when my heart forgot how to beat. Uncas looked down at her, curious. What did you think? April smiled, the memory vivid, despite all that had happened since. I thought, there he is, the man who holds my heart in his hands. He has brought it back to me. Anka's arm tightened around her, and I thought, there she is, the woman for whom I would defy the world. She is still waiting. As the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the eastern sky, April Miller and Uncas sat together before the wickiup that was their home, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating as one. They had crossed boundaries of race and culture, had endured separation and danger, had defied a world determined to keep them apart. And in doing so, they had proven that some fires cannot be extinguished, not by distance, not by time, not by the force of armies or the weight of society's expectations. Some fires burn eternal, leaping across every barrier placed before them, transforming tears into steam, obstacles into ash, embers into an unquenchable flame, a flame that would light the way for generations to come. The end. Dear listener, as the embers of April and Uncas's story continue to glow in your imagination, I'd like to share something just between us. We often speak of youth as life's golden hour, but I've come to believe that's simply not true. The most lustrous gold appears not in morning's first light, but in the rich amber hues of sunset, when the day has gathered all its wisdom and paints the sky with colors only experience can create. That's where you stand now, in life's most majestic sunset hours. Like our resilient April, who found courage when faced with impossible choices, you've crafted a life by navigating crossroads many times over. But here's what makes your journey extraordinary. Unlike April, who had just one dramatic choice to define her, you've made thousands of brave decisions that have quietly shaped our world. When I think of you, I imagine hands that have planted gardens others now enjoy, wisdom that has guided younger generations through storms, and hearts that have loved deeply enough to know that forgiveness isn't weakness, but the ultimate strength. The noise of modern life often fails to honor this kind of quiet power, but in the silence of night, as you prepare for rest, know this. Your generation has weathered changes that would have bewildered even the most adaptable frontier settlers. From writing letters to sending instant messages across oceans, from party line telephones to video calls, from a world divided by iron curtains to one connected by invisible networks, you've adapted with remarkable grace. Tonight, as you lay your head to rest, I invite you to release any lingering burden of regret. The paths not taken were never meant for your feet. The decisions you made, even those that brought pain, have forged the remarkable person you are now. Every line on your face maps a journey of courage that younger generations can only hope to emulate. May your sleep be as peaceful as those rare moments when everything in life seems perfectly aligned. May your dreams take you to vistas of possibility, where age is not a limitation but a vantage point from which to see further than ever before. And may you wake feeling the protective embrace of your own hard-won wisdom, the most reliable guardian you'll ever know. Remember, April and Uncas fought desperately for a freedom you've already claimed, the freedom to be authentically yourself, unburdened by others' expectations. That's not just a story's ending, it's your everyday victory. The dawn will come, as it always does, but tonight belongs to peaceful restoration, to cellular renewal, to the deep, rejuvenating rest that prepares you for tomorrow's possibilities. Your body knows how to heal itself. Trust in this ancient wisdom as you drift into slumber. Safe in your dreams, protected by a lifetime of resilience, may you find the sweetest rest. With profound appreciation for the bridge you've built between yesterday and tomorrow. Wild West Whispers team, thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. From the bottom of our hearts, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, click like, and share this video with someone you care about. Your support is what keeps us going, what inspires us to keep telling stories filled with love, redemption, and emotional turning points. If this tale moved your heart even a little, know that your presence here means the world to us. And don't go just yet. At the end of this video, another powerful love story from our channel will appear. Click and be surprised by yet another emotional journey that we crafted especially for you. With all our gratitude, the Wild West Whispers team